We start in the back. Please identify yourself. Europa Press.
Thank you. Ana Pisonero from the Spanish news agency Europa Press. My first question is on the incidents in Kunduz. Has NATO already been able to determine whether US forces actually did bombard the hospital of Médecins Sans Frontières? And what kind of consequences would NATO anticipate that the US would take against its forces? Also, if this will precipitate in a kind of way a decision by allies whether to continue presence of the ground after 2016 or not. And my second question is on Syria. Is NATO already satisfied with the explanations that Russia has already given on the incidents of violating the Turkish airspace? And my quick final question, if I may, Secretary General, it's on the south. Security on the south flank of the NATO. What other capabilities is NATO considering to deploy in the area? We understand that one of the options could be maritime assets in the Mediterranean, but we also hear that this is a particularly challenging capacity to actually withhold and withstand in the south. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start by praising the extraordinary important work which Doctors Without Borders are doing many places in the world, including in Afghanistan and in Kunduz. And the tragic incident, the loss of lives in the hospital is a very serious matter, and therefore it is so important that we now get all the facts on the table. And that's the reason why we need a thorough investigation, and that this is done in an open and transparent way. And when we have the facts on the table, then we have a much better foundation to draw conclusions and to look into how the different operations are conducted to make sure that we do everything possible to avoid something similar to happen again. So the important thing now is to get the facts, to conduct a thorough and full investigation, and then start to draw conclusions. Then your second question was about the violation of the Turkish airspace. This is a consequence of the increased Russian military presence in Syria. And a minimum requirement is that Russia is able to deconflict with the ongoing coalition fighting ISIL, and also, of course, respect the borders of Turkey, including, of course, the airspace of Turkey, which also is NATO airspace. And for us, this doesn't look as an accident. This is a serious violation of the airspace, and actually there were 2 violations during the weekend. So that just adds to the fact that this doesn't look like an accident. The violation lasted for a long time compared to previous violations of airspace we have seen other places in Europe, and therefore we take this very serious. Anyway, it's unacceptable to violate the airspace of another country, and this is exactly what we were afraid of, that accidents may create dangerous situations. And therefore, it is also important to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that's also the reason why we sent this very clear signal. We have lines of military-to-military communication between NATO and Russia, and I think it will be natural that we use these lines also to communicate between the military authorities how serious we regard this violation of Turkish airspace. The last question was on the south. First of all, I would like to underline that the increased readiness, the increased preparedness, the doubling of the size of the NATO response force is not only a response to the challenges we see to the east with a more assertive Russia, but it's also very relevant to the challenges we see to the south. So increased preparedness, increased readiness, the high readiness joint task force or the spearhead force is something we of course can also deploy, use in the south if and when, or if needed. So that's also a response to the south. Second, we are now working on, as you mentioned, naval presence, naval forces, because that's very relevant for the south. And third, I think that better situational awareness, better surveillance is key, especially when we speak about all the turmoil, all the uncertainty we see to the south of the alliance. So when we now are in the process of deploying new surveillance drones, which are going to be based in Sigonella in Italy, then that's very relevant for the south, because new allied ground surveillance systems or the surveillance drones will increase very much our capability to understand, to see, to have situational awareness, and that is of course important also for the south.
AP? No, AP first. And then AP? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Secretary General, I wondered a follow-up. Yesterday in the statement from that you had made, there was a request for that Russia immediately explain its violations. Have they come to you with anything further than we've heard publicly?
No, not any real explanation more than what we have seen in the also in the media. But as I said, I find it very natural, or for me, it's very natural if that NATO uses the military lines of communications which we have kept in place exactly to address incidents like this. And this was also discussed among the allies yesterday, because we have kept in place direct lines of communication between NATO military authorities and their counterparts in Russia. And I think it's important that we use these lines to express our concern, to go through how we regard the seriousness of the violations of the Turkish airspace, and also to convey a very strong message also on the military level that this is something which should not happen again. And then we will also provide the Russians the opportunity to give an explanation directly to our military authorities.
Itatas?
Thank you, Denis Dubrovin, Itartas News Agency. Mr. Secretary General, in 2012 there was a tragic incident when Turkish airjet was shot down in the Syrian airspace. During this incident, I quote, the President of Turkey, Abdullah Gül, has said, "It is a routine for jet fighter to sometimes fly in and over national borders." My question is it a routine for NATO jets to fly in and over national borders and not to other countries' air jets? And the second question, we start to hear a lot about the moderate Syrian opposition last days. Could you please inform us who is the leader of this opposition? What are we talking about? Thank you very much.
It is not a routine of any NATO country to violate the airspace of other countries. And I think it's extremely important that all nations understand the importance of respecting borders and also, of course, airspace of other countries. I think that the situation in Syria is very fragile. There are many different groups. the important thing for the coalition which is fighting ISIL is to attack ISIL. NATO is also all NATO allies participate in that coalition, contribute to the coalition in different ways, and I am concerned about that we see that the Russian air forces are not mainly attacking ISIL, but other opposition groups, including those who are fighting Assad, and also that many civilian lives have been lost.
Wall Street Journal.
Mr. Secretary General, you said the Russian violation was not an accident. The statements from Moscow, they tried to portray it as incidental and accidental. What makes you sure that it wasn't an accident? Did the Russian planes lock their radar on Turkish planes?
What I said is that it doesn't look like an accident, and that we also have seen two of them, two violations of Turkish airspace during the weekend. Whether the Russian planes locked their fire control radars on the Turkish planes is something I cannot comment on. We base our assessment on the intelligence we receive, but the information, the intelligence we have received indicates or provides me with reasons to say that it doesn't look like an accident what we saw in Turkey during the weekend. Yeah.
Agence France Presse.
Brian McManus, can I ask you about the deployment of the Patriot missiles, please? They're being withdrawn at the moment. What is the position on their possible renewal of that deployment? Thank you very much.
We deployed the Patriots to Turkey to augment their defenses against possible missile attacks from Syria. And what we have seen now is something different. That's a violation of the Turkish airspace. We are constantly reviewing the security situation, and we will also take decisions accordingly. And of course, the Russian actions in Syria and also the violations of Turkish airspace will be part or will be fractured into those assessments. The Patriot mission is renewed on an annual basis. The current mandate runs until the end of this year, and we are now in dialogue with Turkey. We are in dialogue with different allies to see what we will do, what kind of presence that may be there for the next year, but no decision has been taken so far.
Reuters.
Secretary General, thank you. I had two questions. One was, I wondered if you had any sense of what Russia's motives might have been if this wasn't an accident. Could it just be to show NATO that, for instance, Syrian airspace belongs now to Russia? And secondly, you've talked about the need for dialogue. Is there any possibility of convening a council or a NAC with Russia to discuss this? Thank you.
I will not speculate on the motives. I will just reiterate or restate that this is a serious violation of Turkish airspace. It should not happen again. And NATO has expressed strong solidarity with Turkey. And it also underlines that the increased Russian presence in Syria gives reasons for concern, both because we have seen the violation of Turkish airspace, but also because we have seen that the planes and the Air Force of Russia has not mainly targeted ISIL, but they have attacked other opposition groups, and also many civilians have lost their lives. The other was the NATO Russia Council. There has been no decision to convene a new meeting of the NATO-Russia Council. There has been some meetings, so I think it's 2 meetings after the crisis in Ukraine started. There have been some meetings also after the crisis in Ukraine started. Whether there's going to be a meeting in the foreseeable future is not, no decision has been taken so far. But as I already told you, we have other ways of communicating with Russians on the political level, but also on the military level with the military lines of communications, and these are lines we can use in connection with incidents like the one we saw in Turkey.
NPR?
Hi, Terry Schultz with NPR and CBS. You keep saying that you can use these lines of communication. Have you? Has there been any communication other than in the media at this point to the Russian government to demand this explanation? And secondly, on Kunduz, you say that you need to get all the facts on the table. From the facts that you know, what can the U.S. has already said it bombed the hospital. What conclusions can you draw from that about how this is going to affect the continuing mission in Afghanistan? And one final one: how does the Russian buildup, you think, hinder the coalition, the counter-ISIS coalition's actions on the ground? It seems to me there hasn't been any deconfliction. If that's the word, deconflict. I don't know what the noun is for that. By Russia to this point. Thanks.
I can start with the last one. I welcome that there has been contacts between the US and Russia trying to, because this is a US-led coalition fighting ISIL, trying to establish means or mechanisms to deconflict. And the point with deconfliction is to avoid incidents, accidents between different planes from different nations operating in the same airspace. I think the US has to answer how far they have been able to get in the dialogue with Russia. NATO is not part of that dialogue because this is not a NATO operation. But I very much understand the need for establishing systems, ways to communicate, to deconflict, to avoid incidents and accidents. And the violation of the Turkish airspace just illustrates the importance of deconflicting. At the same time, violation of the airspace is not about deconflicting, because that's about actually moving into another airspace. And so that's about respecting borders. And that should be something which is obvious. We don't need to establish new mechanisms to make sure, or we should not be, there is no need to establish new mechanisms to make sure that the countries should respect borders, because that should be obvious. But we'll speak more about deconflicting activity inside the Syrian airspace. The second question was on Afghanistan. So we have already announced that we will assess, we will make decisions related to both the level of our presence in Afghanistan, the resident support force level, and also the geographical outreach, whether it's going to be for regional spokes or bases, in addition to what we have in Kabul, and whether this is going to be both the force level, but also the numbers of bases outside Kabul, whether that's going to be reduced, is an issue which we're going to discuss and address, and then make decisions later on. So that's on the table, both the duration of the whole mission, the level of forces, the number of forces, but also the regional outreach of the mission. So all this is now something we are going to assess, partly based on the assessment of the this year fighting season. And then we will discuss with allies and with partners, because resident support has also a lot of contributions from different partners, and then we will make decisions later. I cannot tell you exactly when, but it's something we constantly assess, and we will make decisions when we have at least the assessment of this year fighting season. And the first question I ordered for. First of all, this happened during the weekend, and today it's Tuesday. But what we have done is to convey a very strong message, partly through my statement, and partly through the statement by the North Atlantic Council. I'm certain that the Russians have read that statement. Second, I stated that I believe it's natural to use the military lines of communication. And this is an issue which we already discussed. And then we have to understand that the lines of communications which we have established with the Russians are in place just or exactly to address incidents like the one we saw in Turkey during the weekend.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
These lines have been there for years, so they haven't called today, but we have discussed yesterday the possibility of using those lines.
Georgian TV.
Georgian Public Broadcaster, Mr. Secretary General, this week you will meet with Georgian Defense and Foreign Affairs Ministers. It's for the first time you will meet them together. So what you want to hear from them and the plans for the nearest future for Georgia. Thank you very much.
So Georgia is a highly valued partner of NATO. And I just visited Georgia, and I opened or inaugurated the new training center there, which is part of the substantial package which we have developed together with the Georgians. We will have a NATO-Georgia Commission meeting in connection with the NATO Defense Ministerial meeting on Thursday. And that's another element of the cooperation between NATO and Georgia. So I'm looking forward to meet the defense minister. I'm looking forward to the meeting on the NATO-Georgia Commission, and this is something which is elements of the increased cooperation between NATO and Georgia.
Next one.
Anne Vestbakke, the Norwegian news agency. Back to Kunduz. NATO has been training Afghan forces for years. So how ready were the Afghan forces to face the situation we now see, regarding they still need American NATO support to cope?
The Afghan National Security Forces and the army is a very capable army, but they are facing great challenges and a lot of threats and the challenges in Afghanistan. So they have proved that they are able to stand the ground. They have proved that they're able to take responsibility for the security in Afghanistan. And we have ended our combat mission. So they are now in full responsibility of the security in Afghanistan themselves. But what we have seen in Kunduz, but also in other places, is that they face challenges. They face a Taliban which is launching attacks on the government forces, but they have been able to retake and to stand the ground again and again. So I think what we have seen is that they are capable, but they're facing big challenges, and we will continue to support them. And no one thought that this was going to be an easy task for them, but they are a big, trained force supported by resolute support. Let me also add that in the long run, there is not a viable or sustainable solution to be totally dependent on foreign or NATO combat forces, large number of combat forces deployed to Afghanistan. So in the long run, the Afghans has to be able to take care of their own security. And that's the reason why we have moved from having the big combat mission to the rescue support mission, training, assisting, and advising them. And it's not easy, but it's in the long run the only viable solution to enable them to take care of their own security.
Last question to El País, please.
Mr. Secretary General, how significant is the presence of Russian forces inside Syria? Does NATO have estimations of the magnitude of this presence, whether we are talking about 100,000 people inside the country? Thank you.
I will not go into any specific numbers, but I can confirm that we have seen a substantial build-up of Russian forces in Syria. Air forces, air defenses, but also then ground troops in connection with the air base they have. And we also see increased naval presence of Russian ships, naval capabilities outside Syria or in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. So there has been a substantial military build-up of Russia with many different kinds of capabilities, forces, over the last weeks.
Thank you for coming to this press conference. We are looking forward to seeing you on Thursday, and our first appointment will be at 7:45 when the Secretary General will have the media doorstep of our defense ministers meeting. So looking forward to seeing you all at 7:45 in the morning on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.